Alright guys, today I wanted to talk about a pretty important topic, and that is the idea of the future of Guild Wars 2. So 2019 just began, Happy New Year everyone, and I'm sure it's got many of us wondering just what is left to be excited about with this MMO. This franchise in general, in terms of a Guild Wars 3 and whatnot, are exciting topics all of their own, but I want to talk about exactly Guild Wars 2, what it has for a feature base, and what the devs might be doing in the future to keep it compelling to us and keep us wanting to purchase new expansions and play new Living World releases. We obviously saw a big theme of some of their anniversary content back in summer was that what they do for us in Living Worlds can be just as good as what they give us in expansions. The question is just, well, what are people looking for? Because the game is quite a few years old now, and a lot of the standard features people clamored for very much in the early days are now implemented. It's not the same product as the one you might remember shortly after release that didn't have easy transmuting access. It's not the same product that was missing out on several PvP-oriented features in terms of leaderboards and ranking up and proper queuing and rating and whatnot. It's not even the same game as the entire franchise had an identity around that doesn't have mounts. The recent expansion added a huge feature that up until then we'd never really associated with Guild Wars. Some people, including myself, were very cynical about being added, and they ended up really high quality, really well done. So what is it exactly we'll see being advertised on the next big expansion and off into the distance? With so much already added, is there anything that you guys can immediately draw to mind that makes you think, wow, yeah, I've been waiting for that? Well, that's kind of what this video is. I hashed out a pretty brief list here on different things I think would be cool, and I kind of wanted to share it with you all. Hopefully by the end of the video, we're all left walking away feeling a bit more inspired and hopeful for whatever next big announcement the devs might have for us as the year goes along. So, first of all, let's just recap. The first expansion, Heart of Thorns, did come with some new features. Namely, I think one of the biggest ones was an entirely new profession, the Revenant, but it also had the Mastery system in general, a concept for how leveling would work after 80 and through expansions in the game. It is an entire expansion that redefined a lot of things, how we view metas, how endgame rewards and collections and stuff work, which I'm sure we can't go into fully here, but it generally added a nice tin of paint, new user interface, freshened things up, with the new profession I think being the big spotlight. Path of Fire didn't add a new profession. Obviously we got a new region and story and stuff, that's not really the topic of this video, but Path of Fire's big feature was, as I just mentioned, mounts. It added, what was the original roster? 5 different mounts with one secret one, or was it 4? Yeah, it was 5 with the secret Griffin, and now in Living World we've even got the roller beetle has been added as well. So POF obviously had a very good headline. In terms of the broader context of MMOs, I think mounts is probably a way bigger deal than even the Revenant was for Heart of Thorns, and now we're here. So what is exactly on the ticket? First is something confirmed we may as well throw out there that we know will be coming in 2019 and beyond, and is a big feature and a big revamp, a big shake-up, but it's only for one of the game modes. That's World vs. World. Yeah, so if you've been missing out on it, the devs have confirmed there is going to be a big shake-up and change to the way that World vs. World matching goes on. Where instead of going to be server-oriented, it's going to be guild and alliance-based, where people group up under different conditions. I think at that point, you'll see the entire idea of servers and worlds and regions and all that kind of stuff that's left over from the original launch, and the way that mega servers work will probably change game-wide. So that's a cool feature, I guess, particularly if you're a big World vs. Worlder. It doesn't add much for anyone else. It's very strange, honestly, and rare for the devs, ArenaNet at least, to announce very early something that they're working on, and that's been on the back burner for ages. If you guys don't know much about it, I do have a dedicated video on the channel. I'll throw in the description, talking all about the specifics of that. So that's one thing, the World vs. World Alliance update. But come on, what else? Well, I think that one thing that will be in the game's future as well that's maybe not too exciting, but is the potential for even more mounts. I don't think that they'll go too crazy with this, because the mounts that Guild Wars 2 offers are more than just a skin of something to ride on. They're an entire dimension of movement that kind of complement and pair with one another very specifically. The terrain that they afford you the access over and the way that their masteries work are all very distinct. Like, only one mount will get you as high as the Springer does. And I don't think the devs kind of want to add too many because there won't be enough space for all of them, basically. I can't imagine Guild Wars 2 mounts where there's 20 of them and they all have their own special little role without, you know, seriously refining and changing the core mechanics of the ones that already exist. So they only have very, very small, slim jobs. Already we're in a bit of a situation where, say, if you're on the Griffin, it can do a lot of things that the other mounts can just better, and I don't think they'll want to exacerbate that. There's also the matter of user interface, there's the matter of keybinds to get on all of them. I think the maximum number of mounts we'll probably see by the time all is said and done with this MMO, a decade from now, will probably be only, what, 3 or 4 more? I reckon 10 would be the max, and they'll probably spread those out very slowly. Maybe we'll get another mount in a future expansion. I know that there's a lot of great candidates for creatures we want to ride if we were to go to, say, Cantha, such as siege turtles and things, and flavor-wise, there's definitely a lot of space. I think if we get some underwater content in the future, there's definitely an idea for an underwater shark that can allow us to swim down there very quickly or whatnot, but they'll be running out of those quite quickly. So, World vs. World Alliances, even more mounts. Come on, give us something actually juicy. Well, the other one that's pretty much a given is going to be new elite specializations, I think. But here the devs can twist things up. So Heart of Thorns introduced the idea of elite specializations. Path of Fire refined on how they're implemented balance-wise and tried to find that balance. They come in a bit overpowered and they slowly get nerfed and tuned over time. One thing we haven't seen the devs do with new elite specializations is go the whole hog and allow them to give our classes new weapons that weren't obtainable before. So we've been saying this even since Heart of Thorns, and the whole idea was announced. Wouldn't it be cool if there was an elite specialization that gave my warrior a spear? A spear is not a weapon we know at all in the game from level 1 to 80 on any of the classes. Obviously, I mean an above water spear. Spears do exist underwater. That's one of the reasons why it could be a good idea, because they could just take the existing models. But what if warriors only got that spear on their elite specialization and acquisition was refined to certain places? That could open all kinds of interesting doors in terms of loot acquisition and the way that various collections and things are structured and meta event rewards work, and obviously opens up new flavor possibilities. A warrior in Guild Wars 2 with a spear is basically a paragon as an elite specialization. You know, that's something that's more explicitly possible. And spears is just the tip of the iceberg. What about crossbows? There's nothing in the game flavor-wise that feels like a crossbow, really, at the moment. There could definitely be elite specializations to get those. People wanted great axes for a long time. People want whips. We can go on a long time of different classifications of weapons, and that's something that if I saw in a new expansion, new elite specializations, and new weapons at the same time, that would be pretty exciting, I think. Another thing in this general ballpark, and the recent update to, you know, at any time be able to look at underwater skills and whatnot up here makes me think about it a bit more, is the much requested build templates. So as more elite specializations come in the game, and more builds become available for different areas, and we have a greater desire for those, and different gear sets and more stats start coming in the game, and more food start coming in the game, and many of them actually have relevance. The idea of messing around with all of our kits, equipping all our different pieces of gear so often, is becoming a bit of a nightmare. And so you get some players like me who just have tons of character slots on our account, with each character that we scroll through being a different build for a different format of the game. This isn't particularly tenable. And I think that build templates are a definite on the table that the devs are probably looking at. We've even seen the community has managed to make their own version of build templates as a concept. A little bit buggy, a little bit uncertain in ways, but if the community can do it on our end, ArenaNet can certainly find a way as well, I would think. So that's definitely something. I think that doesn't necessarily have to come with an expansion, by the way, build templates. It could easily be a living world release. That strikes me as almost a quality of life feature rather than sort of a big ticket selling feature, if you get what I mean. It doesn't necessarily mean much to players outside of the game. And when we're talking big new features, quite often you're trying to catch new people all together. But that would send a lot of us in the community into a bit of a frenzy. If it was a really fleshed out build template system that even added cosmetic stuff too. So for example, I have this setup on my warrior where I'm in the Warbeast armor. If I can, at the press of a button, not just swap the build I'm on, but also the way all of my gear looks, you know, or independently of one another, what it would actually mean is suddenly a lot more skins are becoming interesting to people. Like, you might have built a legendary in 2014 and decided you don't care about any other axe anymore because you have the legendary axe. But if there are cosmetic build templates and loadouts, well, maybe you have the legendary axe just for that one loadout, which you're only wearing while you're in the Shiver Peaks, and you have a different visual style while you're in Crater, and maybe you want a different legendary for that now, and now all of a sudden all the different content in the game becomes interesting to you. That's a problem that Guild Wars is starting to struggle with as it gets older and older. People kind of have the mini, and they have the glider, and they have the appearance that they like, and if they don't have a ton of alts or different builds, they suddenly lose all interest in getting more rewards. So something like that I think would be not just exciting from, hey, the game's easier and more fun to play, but I think it would feed into the rest of the systems in Guild Wars in a beautiful way. So build templates, that is definitely something to be looking forward to. Next, I'm going to give you a very real feature that I think will be happening, should be happening, and is the thing of every topic I'm going to talk about in this video here today, is the thing I'm most excited about, and I think would be a great idea. It's a new playable race. So with Heart of Thorns, we saw a new profession, which made sense because we were missing the third heavy, and there was kind of a slot for it. Back then, the devs made the claim that they were going for this instead of a playable race, because profession changes your skills and affects the game on a broader sense. A new race is kind of more of a cosmetic thing that doesn't really have too much impact, so if they're going to pick one or the other, they went for the profession. Path of Fire didn't add either, and I'm not quite sure why. Maybe it's because they were spending so long on mounts, and like they had that big mounts team, and that was their big focus. But now that mounts are done, I really think that any upcoming expansion, with all those resources and, you know, all that talent and all that time to design something big, I think we could be looking at a new race, an addition to the roster. And that doesn't necessarily mean that they'll change their philosophy behind racial skills. And it doesn't necessarily take away the arguments that the devs made during the Heart of Thorns days. That is basically once you're level 80 on it, it doesn't matter too much. But I still think it has a ton to offer the game, purely because a new race represents a new starting point for new players and returning players. So one of the things is, if I'm an ex-Guild Wars 2 player, I've just come back, I look at my old tunes, but I don't really have any connection with them. I log in, I can't really remember what builds they run, I can't remember how seriously I want to get into that, I don't remember what I was going for. But if an expansion comes out where it's clearly got a new race, well, you're going to make the new race, and everything's going to feel fresh and new, and you have that good starting point for yourself, which I think means a ton. There are a billion different ways they could implement this. Some of them far more plausible than others. There's actually a lot of hidden catches and tricks to implementing a new race that might make it extremely tough. Like any new race, if it has a new, you know, model and animations and stuff, they have to retrofit every single elite specialization and skill and whatnot to work on it. What do they do about all the old armors that are in the game? Do they need to go in and tweak literally thousands and thousands of pieces of gear, particularly various armor types, so that it works on the new race? If they don't do that, are they just going to cop out and basically make something that's like a human but a little bit different, you know? So they've got a lot of questions to ask. Also, there's, in terms of voice acting, how do they handle the new race playing old story? Do they need to go and voice act every single thing the commander has said throughout, you know, 6 years of this game? They've always talked about how difficult it is to record so many different voice lines for the player character, and this would just exacerbate that forevermore and have an initial massive amount of voice acting debt to build back up. I actually did an entire video essay last year on how crazy difficult this concept could be to pull off based on how hardcore you want the devs to do it. But I think in one degree, they'll find the sweet spot that is tenable for the studio. And I think that a new playable race would be really badass. The day that I can see Tengu on the side here and click that will make me so happy. And if I can play a Tengu that has a new 2019, 2020 high quality starting area with high quality story and stuff, except it's kind of low level things, a reimagined leveling experience and whatnot, with all the talent and understanding they have from now, because we haven't seen them implement something like that since 2012, it would be amazing. A new playable race. I really stand by it. I think it could be a great thing for the game and something to watch out for and maybe be excited about. Another big feature people often look for, I must admit myself a little bit less, comes from other MMOs. So when it comes to mounts, for example, the people who asked for mounts for years and years and years often did it because they enjoyed playing with mounts in other MMOs. And it was kind of a thing, hey, if you've got an MMO, you probably have mounts in it, don't you? And if you don't, you've got to explain why in a very clear way. Well, there's a similar situation to a lesser degree for another feature, and that's fishing. So I have played various MMOs that have fishing. In general, I've just played RPGs that have fishing. This idea when it comes to MMOs tends to be paired with a developer okayed way to AFK farm, essentially. Some people like that. They like the idea of making progress in an MMO even if they're not actively doing anything with it. It's kind of a whole box of worms and philosophy discussion that some people will be completely against, some people will be alright. If it's its own entirely enclosed system that doesn't affect the rest of the game, I think it could be okay. We've actually seen ArenaNet do that in the past. The original Guild Wars had a mini-game called the Rings of Fortune, which didn't affect anything else, but it was, hey, here's something to do while AFK if you like, and you could make progress on this AFK thing, and it was really popular. MMOs are social places where you want to meet other people, you want to talk to them. I think one of the problems with modern-day MMOs, and particularly Guild Wars 2, is it's so active, and there are so many buttons to press and so much to watch all the time that it's actually really hard to stop and type to people. Everyone's always on the move very quickly. It's not like back in the olden days where a lot of it was just mouse driven and that would free up your hands for keyboard typing and you could form these close social bonds. A fishing system is something Guild Wars misses in terms of addressing those problems. If there was fishing where we're very hands-off and relaxed and casual about things, maybe we do get those social situations coming back where we go to a body of water, I don't know, anywhere interior, and we meet someone because we're fishing at Mount Maelstrom, and all of a sudden they're on our friends list, and they might not have been. So I do think there's value to fishing beyond people just saying, oh, it's another MMO, so we should have it in this one. I'm not particularly crazy excited about it, but I can imagine fishing being a seller of some kind of big box release in the future, or maybe even as a Living World update. As long as they did it well, I could see that maybe even be in scope for one of those just regular updates coming out into the game. So fishing, that's another one. That's not all. Another feature several people still ask for, and was particularly on the minds of the community around one of the most recent releases because of the Sun's Refuge, and that's player housing. So the game does have pretty good decoration system. It does have a lot of different items you can create and reorganize and place however you like in your guild halls, but it's all big, socially bound stuff with lots of money that has to be spent on them. They're supposed to be collaborative, cooperative projects. The idea of a smaller scale version of guild hall decorating and scribing is something a lot of people want. Something we can take into our home instances, or maybe the idea of a totally new home instance, such as the Sun's Refuge we had this release, where players can take their own solo control and power to decorate in some capacity. I think people would really look forward to. Player housing is a pretty natural fit, just like fishing, kind of a casual feature for Guild Wars 2, regarded for its PvE aspects, a fairly casual game. Player housing is going to be one on this list I think most of you will be nodding your head to and saying, oh yeah, I really want that. Again, I'm saying this a bit lower in the video because I care a bit less, honestly, but it's a big one in a lot of people's eyes, and we could see it for some kind of expansion. And tied to that as well then, to segue into the next idea, it would just be new disciplines. So crafting hasn't had an update since Heart of Thorns when they added scribing. Well, if you are adding fishing, then it would be pretty easy to have a new discipline, like a fishmonger that does stuff with fish. The devs actually talked, for what it's worth, ever since 2012 about the fact they've never really, when it comes to chefing, done fish-based dishes. They're just not really explored much, and they did that deliberately in case one day they wanted to do fishing and whatnot. So you could see new disciplines tied to these things. On the topic of player housing, you could have like a decorator or a machinist or a farmer discipline that are related to acquiring animals and pets and things for your home, or crafting various furnishings for the interiors of buildings and whatnot. The same could actually be said for guild halls on that farmer idea, by the way. I like the idea of a farmhouse building, and you get to actually do some ranching and whatnot. These are all ideas for new disciplines. New disciplines are pretty low on the list of, oh, this is really exciting, but I think there's some flavor value there. Going back to earlier in the video where I mentioned the idea of entirely new weapons being added as well, like crossbows, you would find like Huntsman gets updated to have crossbow crafting and whatnot, so any kind of feature like that would often be hooking back into crafting here, I think. And finally, I have a very minor feature that I thought of, but that's the idea of a library. That's actually why I'm recording this video here at the Astralarium, one of the new maps. We saw in Living World they added proper lore book UI. I don't have any books plugged in on this character, so I can't open them for you. But that's really good. I'd like to see the devs make more use of that, and I can totally imagine some kind of big player library where many of these weird items we find ourselves collecting and lore delivery devices actually get, brought together in a big collection. Guild Wars 2 is about unlocking collections and hoarding items, and a library system is totally in line with the rest of the game. That's also something I think we could find in Living World for what it's worth. So yeah, as far as I'm concerned, those are the big features. It is a much smaller list than it used to be. You used to be able to talk for hours and hours and hours on end about all the kinds of different things, and I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing at all if that list does continue to shrink as they keep adding things that the players are asking for. That's about my list. I haven't forgotten anything, have I? You guys can let me know in the comments if you feel so. For what it's worth, right here at the end, I will note that there's a couple of things I don't think we'll ever see for Guild Wars. Like, these are quite unlikely. I don't think we'll see any large engine changes in terms of optimization, in terms of graphics and lighting and whatever. I know that we're all excited about the idea of this game going into the next decade and looking like a really contemporary piece, but I think we'd probably see some kind of full-on sequel tackling those. I doubt we'll see, for example, the DirectX version change and whatnot. I think that's probably what it is now. We've obviously seen since Path of Fire came out, they're better at post-processing and things do look more gorgeous and the scale has changed and improved, and we'll see that continues. But the game in general and the early maps, I don't think we'll see a big change graphically because of fundamental engine changes. I also don't think we'll ever see another new profession. So in this video, I am an advocate for new races, but I don't think we'll get like a Revenant be added again. I think the devs have really explored everything that they want to. I think all the pieces of the puzzle are in there. I think if they added a 10th profession, it says some really weird things about design for elite specializations and just how difficult that is to continue implementing them. So I don't think we'll ever see another new profession. And finally, World vs. World is getting a big update. We all know this. I opened the video talking to you guys about this. I don't see anything like that for PvP, though. I don't think there's going to be any kind of, like, really big return to big paid lands and whatnot. But maybe its infrastructure will continue to be refined. And we obviously saw special tournaments are a thing now. And maybe we'll see more Indies duos and whatnot. But that's about it. So there you go, guys. That's what I think here at the start of 2019. I'm going to do another video if you're all interested. And let me know if you want to see it. Today we were talking about features and what I think feature-wise Guild Wars 2 could get. Big ticket items in terms of gameplay aspects. But there is a whole other video we can do, which is what is there left to be excited about in terms of stories and lore and places, which I also have a ton of different ideas. What kind of things could we see be added to the story journal? Where might we go back to? Things like this, for example. So I could do a video talking about that too. Let me know if that's what you want to see. Thanks very much for watching. Hope you enjoyed, and I'll be back next time. See you.